Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amy. I am a mum of two boys and really happen to love books and talking about books. So if you would like to stick around, please consider subscribing. There are some videos about motherhood, but from now on it's mainly going to be about books. So yeah, please consider subscribing and joining our little community here. It would really mean a lot. And today is my May wrap up. How are we already halfway through the year? Like, this is just ridiculous how fast this year is going. And this one's been okay. It's not like, I've had a couple of 5 stars, but I've also had a 2-star. So it's been a pretty average reading month, I'd say. Let me just get up my story graph and then we can go through story graph statistics for the month of May. So in May I read 5 books totaling 1,686 pages. My moods were adventurous, mysterious, funny, dark, reflective, light-hearted and emotional. I read 2 fast-paced, 1 slow-paced and 1 medium-paced. I read 1 book that was less than 300 pages and 4 books that were 300 to 499 pages. I read all fiction this month, which is pretty standard for me now. Genres were romance, fantasy, speculative fiction, young adult and mystery. I read 3 digital and 2 physical books. And my average rating this month was 3.9 stars. Not great, but not really bad either. It's not been horrendous, but it's not been absolutely fabulous either. But without further ado, let's jump right into all the books that I read in May. So the first book I read in May was actually a 5-star, thank the Lord, because I think if I got off to a bad reading start for the month, like, I would have just been in a reading slump. I have been really struggling with my motivation, if I'm being honest, this month. But I pushed through, managed to read 5 books, and the first book was a 5-star, and that is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human by Kimberly Lemming. This is the last book in the Mead Mishaps series. This was a 5-star. I thought it was a perfect end to this series, and this is the longest book out of the trilogy. Now, I would say you could maybe read these as standalones, but they do bring in a lot of the other characters from the previous stories, and I'd say this one, it ties in a lot with the first book, so I would maybe say read all 3 in my personal opinion. But we follow Cherry, and she was captured by a dragon many years ago. She has been away from her family for years, and she decides that she is done. She wants to escape, but she's also decided this many times before. But she has decided that this is going to be the time that she escapes. And then, just as, you know, just by her luck, another dragon named Dante comes along. He finds her and says he will take her home. Before he says that, she ends up drugging him, basically, and gets him very drunk, very drugged. So even though he was going to say, yes, I'll take you home, she decided to drug him to try and convince him anyways. Her plan ends up backfiring. She then becomes Dante's fated mate, and this whole new adventure begins. This is kind of like enemies to lovers, which I really liked. Like, not fated, like, not absolutely despise each other, they just highly dislike each other at the beginning of this book. But then, as you've probably gathered from if you've read the other 2 books, that things do end up with a happy ending, and, you know, they do end up becoming lovers. This isn't as good. This is a very strong 5-star, but it's not as strong as the first book, which is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. But I did think this was a perfect end to this trilogy, and I would highly recommend this trilogy if you want a bit of spicy fantasy romance. Yeah, highly recommend. And if Kimberly Lemming decides that she wants to write another series like this, I will pick it up, no questions asked. The next book I read, this was the 2-star unfortunately, and it was an arc I got through NetGalley, and it is Dragon Den by Chris Dean. This book I was so bored, and there were just parts of this book that did not make sense. I was so confused. It was just, you were just dropped in different plot points of the book, and you know, there was no chemistry between the characters like there's supposed to be a romantic interest. I didn't feel like there was any romantic interest. It was just very chop and change, and there was no fluidity in this story to me personally. So we follow Marcus, and his dream since he's been a little kid is to become a dragon rider, and he is in the Dragild Military Academy, and at the end of the first year they have a test to see if they can break a dragon, which basically means connecting with the dragon. So they become connected to one another, but he fails to break any dragon whatsoever during this last trial. So the commander actually offers him a broken dragon, so a dragon who has already been broken, but Marcus then needs to earn this dragon's trust because his previous rider was killed in an accident. So Marcus needs to earn the trust of this dragon basically. So the commander agrees to give him this already broken dragon if he can investigate and infiltrate the dragon's den, sorry. Because the commander believes that they have been infiltrating and attacking. I say infiltrating and attacking, hijacking basically. They've been hijacking these trucks that have obsidian inside, which in this book is a very, very, very precious stone that can be used to enhance the skills of dragon riders and dragons. And it's being smuggled. So the commander then basically hires Marcus to try and investigate what's going on. And that's the basic premise of the book. This was kind of described as a mix between Fourth Wing and The Fast and the Furious, and I can see that, but this book actually pretty much stole a direct quote from the Fast and Furious movie, and that just kind of put me off. I kind of thought it was a bit cheesy, but I don't know. There's not much I can do about what people want to put in their books, but I just didn't think it needed to be in there. There were just so many parts of this book that I think just did not need to be in there. So that is a reason why I'm giving it 2 stars, and unfortunately I probably won't be reading any more by this author. Now this next one actually really surprised me. This is like a contemporary romance, and I'm not a big romance girly. Unless it's in fantasy, I am not a big contemporary romance girly, and I loved this. This was another arc I got through NetGalley, and it is Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. I rated this 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It was just so light-hearted and funny. It's got enemies to lovers in it, and it was just so relatable, but not relatable in the same sense. But we follow Delphi, and at the start of the book she is a very grumpy introvert. She is very introverted. She doesn't hang around with anybody, and at the start of the book she actually dies. She chokes on a piece of food and she ends up dying and ends up going to heaven, and she ends up meeting this kind of like heaven therapist, and then another guy comes in named Jonah, and they end up falling for each other very, very hard. But then apparently Jonah was just a glitch in the system. Sometimes things happen where people come to heaven or the afterlife and they're not supposed to be there, so they get sent back. However, Delphi was definitely supposed to be there. So this therapist makes a deal, says she can pull a few strings, and says if you can find Jonah, because his memory will be wiped of you, if you can find Jonah within 10 days of now, you can stay alive. However, if you do not find him, you will come back here and you will come and work for me. And Delphi agrees. And he also has to kiss her of his own volition and free will. That is one of the biggest catches in this. She agrees because she has fallen head over heels for Jonah, and she ends up asking for the help of her next door neighbour Cooper, and Cooper is very grumpy as well. He's a very grumpy introvert, but he also seems to have like a new woman every few days, and they just do not like each other. They always give each other like menacing glances, and they are just not fans of each other. Cooper ends up asking for a favour in return. So Delphi asks for his help because he is a dab hand with computers and tracking people. So she asks for Cooper's help. Sorry, I cannot talk today. She asks for Cooper's help, but then he says, you need to do something for me in return. He asks to take a selfie with her and then sends that to his parents because he doesn't want to be set up with the girl down the street who he really dislikes. And Delphi ends up becoming Cooper's fake girlfriend to please his parents. There's lots of like enemies to lovers going on. There's I've never read a book with this kind of trope in where you like go to heaven and get sent back and you have to find this person. Like, it's a very, very unique and interesting trope, and I really, really liked it. And in those 10 days, Delphi finds friends and love in some of the most unexpected places. And it was just such a fun book, you know, seeing this little introverted girl make friends, and, you know, it made me so happy because she was bullied very heavily during school, and that related a lot with me because I was bullied a lot in school, and I ended up becoming quite a big introvert because of that. But then seeing how she blossoms and finds love and finds friendship, it just made me feel so happy inside, and it made me feel quite emotional reading this book actually, because, you know, I kind of related to her quite a lot. The only reason why I docked off half a star was because some of the actions of Delphi just made me physically curl up inside myself and cringe. Like, there were just some things that I did not like. There were some actions that I did not agree with. But other than that, I loved this. And if you like contemporary romance, I highly recommend you pick this up. Next is the next 5-star read that I had. I had 2 5-star reads this month. And I've seen this everywhere. So I thought, it's on my physical TBR, let's try it. And oh my gosh, I am so glad I did. The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Oh my god, what a whirlwind this book is. It was just, I've gone and picked up the other 2 books in this trilogy, but that is in a book haul that I will be filming another day, and that will be out very, very soon. But I loved this so much. I could not put it down. The chapters are a maximum of 5 pages long. Maximum. And like maybe 6 pages. I think the longest is 6 pages. I ate this up. It took me a couple of days because I can't, you know, do reading sprints as much as I would want because I have 2 children to look after and I have a house to clean and everything like that. But I read this in like 2 days. I adored this book. It's got a whodunit kind of vibe, and like the Hunger Games, trials, puzzles. It was kind of like a whodunit but with Lara Croft mixed in, but involving lots of different people. It was very, very interesting. So we follow Avery Grams, and she has nothing. She lives with her sister who keeps getting back into a relationship with her on-off abusive boyfriend, and she just wants to get a scholarship. She wants to go to college and just get out of this town that she is in. She wants to just completely start fresh, until one day someone shows up at her school and says that she needs to be present, her and her sister need to be present for a will reading from this billionaire Tobias Hawthorne. And she's very confused. And her sister, Libby, says, I kept getting these letters in the post, but I thought they were a scam. Turns out it's not. So they end up going to this will reading. This billionaire leaves Avery pretty much his entire fortune, and he disinherits the rest of his family, including his 4 grandsons, which are the Hawthorne grandsons. And a condition of this is she now has to live in the house with the family members that Tobias Hawthorne has just disinherited. And it's just, I felt so many things reading this book. There's a little bit of romance in it, but I think my favourite Hawthorne brother was maybe Jameson, and I think that's who Avery gets a love interest for first. He's kind of like the one who shies away a little bit, but I also love Nash because he's pretty much just a cowboy, and I feel like he belongs in an Elsie Silver book. But this was so bingeable. I loved this so much. So the 4 brothers are Xander, Jameson, Nash and Grayson, and they all solve puzzles together with Avery to find out why he has left his entire fortune to Avery and not his grandsons. I don't even have words. It had so much suspense, it had so much adventure, action, puzzles. You know, it had me on the edge of my seat for the entire time. And then when I finished it, there's a little plot twist at the end. I just looked at my husband, just mouth agape. I was like, oh my god, I need to get the second one. So the next day I went and bought the second one. So next month may have the final 2 books in. I'm not sure yet because I do have a lot to read, but I adored this book so much. So the last book that I read in May, literally by the skin of my teeth, because I read it on the last day of May, I finished it on the last day of May I should say, was another arc I got through NetGalley, and it is The Branded by Joe Riccioni. I gave this 3 stars. It was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't really bad either. It was just kind of middle of the road. So we follow Nara and Osha, and they live in the Citadel, where the Moor, who are purebloods basically, they thrive by reproducing with one another and keeping this pure, uninfected bloodline going, and they are strong, they are healthy, and they are just tucked away and live in the highest points of society. And then there is the Branded, who are the lowest point of society, poorest of the poor. They get sick very easily. They have physical, you know, markings all over their skin to show that they are a Branded, and they are seen as basically scum by the more pure people. And I found that very interesting, that kind of like societal boundary and keeping the poor and the rich separated. It did kind of like relate with how things are today with like the rich and the poor, and how they have no idea of what it's like to be in that position. It did make me think a lot of that, which was quite thought-provoking. Like it did provoke quite a lot of thoughts and feelings about how society is just awful today. So I think that was a really good point in the book. But it's then discovered that Nara is actually a Branded. Her and her sister fled from their grandmother's house after she was killed, and they ended up in the Citadel together, and it was under the impression that they were both pure. However, it was then discovered that Nara is actually a Branded, so she is banished into the tundra without her sister. She has to fend for herself. She has to, you know, help other Branded live. She has to forage her food. She's a very, very skilled hunter and forager, and she has to help them. Until one day she bumps into another Branded named the Wrangler, who has been spying on her sister and all the other more out there. And with the Wrangler's assistance, she discovers a lot more about the Citadel and the Pure than originally she thought was true. So there's corruption, there's conspiracy, and it did provoke a lot of thoughts. However, the storyline I just was not that interested in. I just found it a bit bland and a bit boring. And there is enemies to lovers in this. The Wrangler and Nara do end up kind of becoming an item. But they do have that kind of love-hate relationship. The sarcastic comments I found quite funny. But the storyline itself, I was just a bit like, eh. I wasn't excited to read this. This took me a long time to read. It took me about 10 days to read because I would go on to other things, but I just didn't feel excited to carry it on. And, you know, I finished it because I felt like I had to, not because I necessarily wanted to. But there is a second book in the series, and I don't think I'm going to read it because I just wasn't that interested in the first. But this book might interest some people and it might not. Reading is definitely subjective. So give it a try if you do like the sound of it, but it just personally wasn't for me. Well, that was all the books I read in May. I just cannot believe we're in June already. This is just like, it's ridiculous how fast this year is going. I don't like it one bit. But, and it has just hit me that in a month I'm turning 27. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing if you want to see more. I have got a book haul coming very, very soon, and I'm hoping to start weekly reading vlogs. That is a big, big hope of mine. But we shall just have to see, because having a 3.5-year-old and a 6-month-old is exhausting. But I really hope you guys will stick around for that. So if you haven't, don't forget to subscribe if you are interested in my channel and you want to see more. And I will see you very soon in another video. Bye.